My name is Catherine, and as a cynical art history teacher, I came to teach at Wesley College, which is known to the outside world as an Ivy League college for women. Filled with enthusiasm, I came here from California, looking forward to planting my dreams in this fertile academic ground. Looking at the expressions on my classmates' faces, the president's words made me excited about this campus. However, the first class gave me a kick in the pants. The students seemed to know more about each of the paintings I showed them than I did. One by one, they rushed to name and contextualize the paintings, even including historical details that I didn't think were known. I insisted on continuing the lecture, but every time a new slide came up, they effortlessly snapped up answers.
Seated scribe, Egypt, 2400 BC.
Peasant couple plowing, 16th century BC, Egypt.
Without waiting for me to say anything. At that moment, I was a little nervous and embarrassed, especially when I saw the girls with their contemptuous smiles. They seemed to have memorized the textbooks and tutorials long ago, treating the subject as a rote topic rather than a true artistic exploration. They laughed at me for not being worthy of being a teacher, and that it would be better to take my class than to study by themselves. While the students were scattered, the school board approached me, and their words were filled with contempt. I learned from my coworkers that the position was originally going to be a friend of the school leader. It's just that that person went elsewhere, so the spot was reluctantly given to me. It felt like everything was completely different from what I expected. And at this school, the most popular sport was tumbling, because it was said that whoever won the championship got priority in marriage. The curriculum was actually an etiquette class, and the lessons taught all about how to serve your husband well.
Boss is probably testing you as much as your husband. What next?
File for divorce?
A few years from now, your sole responsibility will be taking care of your husband and children.
I live with another teacher, but she also warned me not to let the girls think they knew me well enough. So I went through their files all night long. The next day, I decided to put up a drawing that I couldn't find the answer to in the textbook and wanted to see their reaction. This action really made them panic. They searched the textbook but could not find any information about the painting.
Carcass by Soutine, 1925.
It's not on the syllabus.
Is it any good? There's no wrong answer.
In fact, I do not intend for them to answer this question with the contents of the textbook. I just wanted them to say what they understood and thought. At this point, Betty stepped forward and said, "Art has standards. If anything can be considered art, what the hell are they learning?" I understand her position. Through these two cases, I want them to understand that art is not defined by the standards, but it is more important to think, feel, and understand the true meaning that lies behind it. However, new ideas and orthodox and conservative notions are always on a collision course. Betty was particularly upset with me. She was preparing for her wedding and was emotionally stressed. When she heard that my fellow dormmates approved of me, she said even more dismissively, "No man would marry a woman like her." Coincidentally, that's when Betty realizes that her classmate has a condom in her hand, and it's from Manda, the school nurse. Manda's intention was for the girls to learn to protect themselves, but for Betty, was simply a huge shock to her values. She publicly slammed Manda in the school newsletter, saying that she had discredited the school, which had always prided itself on its code of conduct. As a result, Manda was expelled, and I felt the absurdity of it all. It all made me finally realize that this best girls' school was not really training these women as future leaders in all fields, but only wanted to mold them into perfect human wives. All of this was deeply disappointing to me and reinforced my belief that art and reflection are at the heart of our education, not dogma and prejudice. I gave a failing grade to the paper of a student who had always had excellent grades because she had merely copied the opinions of experts without any thinking of her own. This was the first time she had gotten such a poor grade from me. However, I decided to give her a chance to rewrite it, and as a result, I found out that she had actually taken a pre-law course. During class, I secretly handed her an application form for Yale University, hoping that she would go there to further her education. And Betty, ever the brilliant but curmudgeonly student, entered into marriage early in her schooling. Her wedding is big and grand, with celebrities gathering to highlight the prestige. Betty seemed to feel that she had reached her ultimate goal in life. However, I continued to teach, stepping outside of the textbook and lecture notes to stimulate my students' imagination and curiosity. My bluntness, edginess, enthusiasm, and humor resonated with most of my students. But there were still some conservative students who couldn't appreciate my abstract artwork and privately complained to the principal that my classes were not formal enough. The principal approached me and warned me that if I didn't make adjustments, I probably wouldn't be able to stay on. Joan and her boyfriend went to Betty's house on Christmas Day, and she whispered to Betty that she had been accepted early to Yale.
You gotta be kidding me. What right does she have? You're getting married.
Sensing that her friend was about to be misled by me, Betty decided to confront me even more tit for tat after Christmas. I was not happy with her behavior either. Because of her marriage, she missed 6 classes, a paper, and a midterm. Although the college tacitly approved of these behaviors, and they would not affect Betty's graduation. But in my case, it was a definite no-no.
Come to class, do the work, or I'll fail you.
I don't think marriage should be a girl's final choice, and not every relationship has to end in marriage. I believe it's better to just go with the flow. However, this attitude provoked Betty even more in the school publication. She used her own marriage as a case study for some photos of doing housework and studying. It preached that women could still balance school and home after marriage, and that it was their responsibility to have children and continue traditions. After the article was published, it quickly drew attention, and the principal warned me again to refrain from further radical statements. I know that it has been a huge step forward for women to be able to receive an education compared to what they used to be able to do. However, I began to realize that it was just a different way of shackling women. It pains me even more that these girls are learning that they are not really thinking about and pursuing self-growth, but rather living according to what others expect them to look like. I once showed a commercial in my classroom which talked about the image of contemporary women.
What does that mean?
I didn't realize that by demanding excellence, I would be challenging the roles you were born to fill. Is that right?
I don't want to watch these talented girls end up living only to be the appendages of others. I put in so much effort and still feel like it's all for naught. I finally realized that I can't force others to follow my ideal path. I can only stand aside and show them the way to see their choices.
It's my mistake.
I began to recognize between my ideals and reality that there was an unbridgeable chasm. The silence of the girls made me feel a deep power. I uncovered the fragile kernel underneath their gorgeous exteriors. Betty felt her husband often cited overtime as an excuse for not coming home after their marriage, and she spent her days either looking for him or waiting for him. All this made me realize that marriage is not the only option for every woman. Joan had also secretly gotten married and decided to give up Yale to live with her husband in Philadelphia. I helped her contact law schools in Philadelphia and did my best to enable her to continue her education even after her marriage. But Joan told me she wanted a home.
I want a home. I want a family. That's not something I'll sacrifice. This is what I want.
I was a little lost, but understood that everyone had their own choices, and I couldn't force them to follow my path. When I learned that the trustees had decided to keep me employed, although they required me to teach from the department chair's syllabus, and all lesson plans had to be submitted for review in advance, I wasn't thrilled to be able to stay. My beliefs were still there, but in the atmosphere of this college, I knew there was nothing I could do to change anything. Betty finally realized that her husband was out with someone new. In devastation and despair, she felt abandoned, and it was as if what she once thought was her marriage and happiness had all gone to pieces at once. In the midst of this pain, she gradually came to her senses. She realized that what brought her happiness was not the lost marriage. Finally realized the absurdity and hopelessness behind it all. She began to understand the bitterness I had felt. The girls were finally no longer confined by those so-called aesthetic formulas and standards. Their eyes were finally able to see art of their own, to perceive and understand it. After the class, each of them started from understanding Van Gogh's sunflowers and painted their own unique sunflowers, showing their own understanding and style. This is exactly what I want them to do, to think and express themselves instead of following blindly. Betty finally decided not to compromise. Despite her mother's continued counseling, Betty filed for divorce and said goodbye to her longtime marriage. At the same time, she decided to apply to Yale Law. I knew that this girl, who had once opposed me the most, was now taking steps toward her own freedom and independence. In the end, I decided to turn down the school's offer of an employment contract. That working conditions. When I left that day, Betty and Joan, along with the other students, rode their bikes right behind the car, waving goodbye. Betty, who had once been the most opposed to me, the one who wanted to antagonize me the most, was now the one who was most reluctant to part with me. It brought tears to my eyes, but in my heart, I was immensely relieved. I knew that I had made an effort to break the chains of those traditions, and that at least some of the girls had begun a free and independent outlook on life of their own. Everyone should have the courage to make choices and pursue their own dreams. I hope that every girl has the courage to follow it, to choose it, and to take her destiny into her own hands.